Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to another part of my thesis on theology and history of prehistoric times. This part is about the formation of the surface forms of the Earth and specifically about the formation of our mountains. I have already told you in another video that our mountains could not have formed in the way we learned in school, i.e., that two continental plates meet head-on and in long periods of time, of about several million years, the mountains then grow upwards. How do we know that this is not possible, even though we learn or have learned it that way in school? Most people will not know that in physics class at school they learned the proof of Newtonian mechanics that the theory of mountain formation that is common today is not possible. Newtonian mechanics states that two solid bodies colliding exert opposite forces and repel each other. What cannot happen, however, is that they collide with each other and then form mountains or hills towards the top. Not even small hills can be formed. If you are unsure, simply ask residents of earthquake zones, for example in California in the USA. It will be confirmed that neither mountains nor smaller hills have been formed in recent centuries, although in California the continental plates are constantly colliding. As already mentioned, our mountains and high mountains are petrified giant creatures of prehistoric times, including the Nephilim, mentioned in the Old Testament. These are mentioned by the Holy Spirit only very briefly before the flood and then never again in the Bible. Many Christians will have wondered what has become of them, although established theology has not yet given them an answer to this question. When I claim in this video that our high mountains are petrified Nephilim, i.e., giants of prehistoric times, this means that they must have reached a size of up to 8 kilometers, because that's about how high the Himalayas are. I hope to be able to provide you with proof of this in this video. I'll start detecting fossilized life forms on our Earth right away with my desktop wallpaper. However, I have to say that this picture already has a certain advanced level. I assume that the majority of my viewers here will not recognize any petrified beings at first glance. This video is also intended to qualify them as my viewers in being able to find them independently and from now on without my hints. In the rest of my video, I will guide you step by step on how to do that. In the case of significant fossils, it is often the case that a small temple building has been erected next to it, as is the case here in this picture. I can't say whether this is a Buddhist or Hindu building, because I have almost no knowledge of Hinduism and Buddhism. The building was erected in such a way that a face can be interpreted into it. That's why the windows were painted in this way. It should inspire us to recognize a face in the building. The actual background idea will then be that the viewer will hopefully recognize faces in the mountain range behind the building. Unfortunately, however, there is nowhere to be found this hidden train of thought on this building. Now I'm not going to go into the solution. This happens towards the end of my video. We'll start with lighter examples. Let's start with a cave in Thailand. In English, it is called the Naka Cave. Although it is a famous cave in Thailand, according to ChatGPT, there is no English language Wikipedia article. Unfortunately, due to the difficult transcription of Thai words into German, it was impossible for me to identify the cave in a German cave overview in Thailand, and I did not find a Wikipedia article in English myself. Naka Cave is located about 90 kilometers south of Bhutan. The district capital of Bhutan province is about 90 kilometers north of the cave. In the picture it is easy to see that this is the head of a snake, which also does not hang limply towards the ground. I assume that in ancient times beings actively prepared themselves for death through the flood mentioned in the Bible and had already brought about rigor mortis through selective enzyme blockers, so that their bodies could be better identified by us in the time after the flood. To deepen and justify this will be done in another video on my channel. I can't do that here in this video about mountain formation. Geology thinks it can explain how geological processes are said to have created the shape of a snake. I can tell you, as my viewers, that these alleged geological proofs or explanations must be riddled with methodological errors and speculative fantasies. Of course, geology cannot, in my opinion, explain how the external shape of a snake should have evolved through geological processes. The petrified snake in Thailand in the Naka Cave is not a giant, that is obvious. However, the diameter of the snake's head is several meters. For us today, however, this is an impressive figure. Specifically, I suspect that the snake has a height of about 4 meters. In total, the snake is said to have an approximate length of 100 meters. If you are lucky enough to know a zoologist or, better yet, a snake expert, then visit this cave with him and have it confirmed that it will obviously be a petrified snake. The snake expert only needs to confirm the true characteristics of a snake to them. He does not have to provide an explanation as to why this petrification occurred. That's what I do here on this channel in other video posts. Next, we'll look at a mountain range in the Pacific Ocean, presumably near New Zealand. Because I assume that this mountain range is a petrified dragon of prehistoric times. Dragons are familiar to us from myths and fairy tales. In the Old Testament, it is also sometimes assumed that Leviathan and Behemoth could be dragons in the Book of Job. Here in New Zealand, a mountain juts out of the ocean. According to the authors of this source, from whom I have this interpretation and with whom I have subscribed, this mountain is a petrified dragon. To make this easier to see, the dragon's snout was color-coded in red. Even if many viewers of my video would deny the historical reality of dragons at first, I ask them to hypothetically assume that I could be right. How could it be proven that this mountain range near New Zealand was probably once a dragon that was petrified by the processes of the biblical flood? This question can be answered if we study the flight capability of this hypothetical kite. If a dragon is mentioned in a mythology or fairy tale, it can fly. Because this is so consistently mentioned in the mythologies, we hypothetically suspect that this would have been the case in ancient times. Now all we have to do is get a Boeing engineer to certify the flight capability of this mountain range in the ocean. Even if only a few of my viewers are aircraft designers, the rest of us already suspect it. This mountain range can't possibly have aerodynamic flight characteristics. The only physically conceivable possibility would be the principle of an airship. An airship has a large cavity in which hydrogen was contained. Hydrogen is lighter than air and therefore rises to the top. As a result, the hydrogen pulls the entire airship upwards with it. I could imagine that physicists and biologists could model on the computer what a presumed weight of this great dragon would have been at that time. Furthermore, they will also be able to model what volume an air bubble must have in order to contain enough methane, so that this methane bubble can then carry the weight of the kite upwards. Similar to a zeppelin. Based on today's cows, we can deduce that gaseous digestive end products can also be methane gas. Our cows are just forcing this out and are supposed to endanger the world's climate according to the stupid opinion of the German federal government. In the case of a kite, I assume that the methane was not emitted, but was captured in the methane bubble. It will please many people on Earth that the ancient dragons would have been climate neutral. However, it was of no use to them, as Jesus also made short work of these climate neutral dragons during the flood. In school, we learned that methane gas is flammable. This helps explain the consensus of mythologies that dragons could also breathe fire. Cave divers and mountaineers only have to blast themselves into the rock in the dragon's mouth. If the tenor of my statement is correct, they must then encounter the trachea and esophagus and possibly a third passage, which will then end in the methane bubble. I wouldn't be surprised if this mountain range in the ocean is mostly hollow inside and must therefore have had a relatively light weight. Unfortunately, mythologies and fairy tales are only partially citable sources. That's why we'll have to see if we have sources for dragons elsewhere. In the apocryphal Book of Enoch 60 verse 7, the biblical Behemoth and Leviathan are also mentioned, but not as a dragon. It is only said that the Behemoth is male and Leviathan is female and one of them lives in the sea. In the Old Testament biblical Book of Job 41 verse 23 it says, I am translating directly from the German translation, because for reasons unknown to me, the King James translation differs massively from the German translation. It brings the depths of the sea to a boil like a cooking pot, makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Job 41:16 can be interpreted as a hint with the fence post from the Holy Spirit that Leviathan and Behemoth have also been petrified, because it says, His heart is firm as stone and firm as the lower millstone. The bones of the Leviathan and Behemoth are hollow inside, so this also reduces the weight. The Holy Spirit informs us in Job 40 verse 18, "Tubes of bronze are his bones, and his bones are like rods of iron." Job 41 verse 17 says, "Those in power are afraid of its elevation, they retreat in dismay." So this means that despite the immense technology they must have had at their disposal in ancient times, humans were defenseless against the dragons. This will be discussed in another video on my channel. I assume that the dragon was not only a hybrid of a bird and a reptile, but must also have been a hybrid of a god, similar to the hybrid of the gods for 43 and the wives of men. We now come to a simpler example of an ancient Nephilim who has been petrified. That's why we're looking at this picture here. The temple makes it easy to see that this mountain is in Asia, even if I don't know where exactly. The mountain behind the temple is a Nephilim lying on its back. I suggest that you just stop the video and try to recognize the face of the giant of old, lying on his back, on the mountain range. In a few moments, I rotate the image 90 degrees, so you can then see an upright head with facial contours. And in 3, 2, 1 now. Now try to see facial contours again. Stop the video and let the image sink in for a few minutes. I'll show you the contours of your face in a moment. And in 3, 2, 1 now. Please forgive me for only roughly marking the contours of the face. I'm not an artist, photo designer, or IT geek. I think that you should now see the face clearly. In a few moments, I'll give you some help information in another picture. And in 3, 2, 1 and now. Critical viewers might argue that perceptual psychology teaches us that the human brain likes to interpret the familiar into the unknown. It could therefore possibly also be a self-deception from a psychological point of view. In principle, this statement is correct, but these shapes of faces of giant creatures can be seen all the time in our mountains, for example in photos of mountains and rock massifs or even with the help of Google Earth. The unbelievable number of such examples therefore shows that we are not subject to our own self-deception of our brain, but can actually clearly recognize facial contours. This picture shows very clearly that it is right on the part of the Catholic Church not to include the Book of Enoch in the canon of the Bible, because a biblical book should always tell the truth. According to the Book of Enoch, however, the largest giants at that time should have had a height of only about 1.5 kilometers. We read together in the Apocrypha Book of Enoch chapter 7 verses 2 and 3. 2 And they conceived and gave birth to mighty giants, the length of which was 3,000 cubits, 3 who consumed all the income of men, until men could no longer feed them. The size indication in the Book of Enoch must therefore have been falsified over time. With Google Earth, it is not difficult to see giants of 8 and even significantly more kilometers in our mountains when we look at Mount Everest later in this video. As the next example, let's go to Greece in Europe, to Mount Stephanie. Stephanie is said to be a famous mountain there, but I have to admit that I have never heard of this mountain. In the case of Olympus, we proceed according to the same method as we have just done with the unknown mountain in Asia. You can now stop the video and see if you can make out the facial contours of the head lying on its back, which is Mount Stephanie today. I will rotate the image 90 degrees again in a few moments and straighten it up. And in 3, 2, 1 now. Now they can try to see the contours of the face by means of an aligned head. If you need time, stop this video at this point. In a few moments, I will show you auxiliary markings. And in 3, 2, 1 now. Let this image sink in. I think this is very interesting to see. We now come to another summit mountain in Olympus. I suspect that this is even the main summit. Now, before you begin to see facial contours, you should consider the position of the Nephilim when you look at this mountain peak. Is it more to the left or to the right? Where is his forehead and where is his chin? Please note that we are not considering normal tall people here. The Nephilim are a hybrid race of a 443 god and a human. The physiognomy, i.e., the appearance, can therefore also be slightly modified. Nevertheless, the appearance of modern man is a great help in recognizing the facial contours of the fossilized Nephilim of ancient times in our mountains. In a few moments, I turn the picture around again. And in 3, 2, 1 now. I'm not going to show you any more information now, because I think you can already apply the principle and methodology yourself. Here you have a picture that I used on the first page of my thesis on theology and history of prehistoric times. It is a giant lying on its back. In a few moments, I will show you the recognizable facial contours again. Since the ancient Nephilim mentioned in the Bible died a violent death during the flood and then underwent petrification processes, you should not be surprised if you do not conform to today's ideals of beauty. Also, it shouldn't confuse you if certain parts of the body, such as arms or legs, are completely or partially missing. I'll show you the additional information for help in 3-2 now. The second giant on my cover is very clear in my opinion. Here we also have the situation that we now have not only one head alone, but can see the whole body almost completely. Unfortunately, I don't know where this photo was taken. I don't have a scale, so I can't tell if this giant is only a few hundred meters tall or if this mountain has a length of several kilometers. This giant is on its left. His head is clearly visible on the left side of the picture with facial contours. In a few moments, I will show you more information about the help. If you want to see everything on your own and need time again, stop this video. The information comes in 3-2-1 now. The next picture of a Nephilim illustrates what was said a few moments ago, that one should not look for today's ideals of beauty. Here we have a Nephilim that looks something like an orangutan. No further information from me is displayed about this image, as this image is fairly easy to recognize. Here in this picture of a fossilized Nephilim you can see very well an eye, nose, mouth, the chin area and forehead. The head is clearly visible from a side perspective. There is no further help information from me about this picture. The next example is a Nephilim lying on its side, half submerged in the ground. Despite this circumstance, you can clearly see his head on the left side, as well as two eyes, the nose and the mouth. The neck and shoulders of the part which still protrudes from the ground is also clearly visible. As almost always, I don't know where this picture was taken. If someone knows, they can write it in the comments. In a few moments, I will show you more information about the help. This is done in 3-2-1 now. In the following, we will no longer focus on individual Nephilim as concrete subjects or petrified persons, but on other surface forms on Earth. I have already said that the mountains are petrified Nephilim or other beings of ancient times. But there are other interesting things when we look at the topography of our planet. Thus, we will see that continents can be in the shape of dragons, both larger and smaller. But then they only look like that and were not real dragons in ancient times. In this regard, we should remember the revelation of John, where he says in chapter 13, verse 1, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." According to many theologians, this was a dragon that came out of the sea. What I want to say is that the Earth can also have very strange manifestations when viewed from above. If we look at it together with Google Earth, we are now at Google Earth and see Africa in front of us at the bottom left and Europe and Asia above it. Europe and Asia, viewed from the air or space, could also be interpreted as the view of a dragon. Spain forms the head of the dragon in this interpretation. Turkey is the left front leg and Scandinavia is the right front leg. The hind legs are not visible, as they disappear into the land masses. For critical viewers of my video, this may again only be far-fetched and understood as a self-deception of our brain, which always strives to bring order to chaos and falls back on familiar structures. We shall see, however, that, as with the authentic Nephilim as subjects, there are too many examples of these topographical surface forms of the Earth for this to be a coincidence. But if it is not a coincidence, what did Jesus have in mind when he designed the surface of the Earth with these physiognomies after the flood? This question will not be answered in this video, but on other videos on this channel. Now let's look a little further to the right, where the People's Republic of China is located. My hope is that you can see my black cursor well. I circle the face now. A nose can be seen very clearly. The eyes can also be seen. The left eye is slightly worse than the right eye. I'm going to show you guides again in a few moments, in 3, 2, 1, now. In particular, I would like to draw your attention to the chin on this face. Connoisseurs of geography know that this darker or brown structure is the Himalayan high mountains. In this video, I have already said that today's mountains and high mountains are fossilized beings of ancient times, such as the Nephilim and dragons. So it's strange when you now broaden the perspective a bit and look down from space on the region around the Himalayan high mountains and then perceive that this mountain range is the jawline of a face. Could this be a freak of nature? A coincidence? I don't think so. Christians know that this is what Jesus must have arranged. One could almost imagine that Jesus' intention was that once mankind reached a certain level of technical knowledge, where they would have satellites, they would want to be able to see the face from space. So Jesus wanted the Himalayan high mountains to be clearly recognizable as the jawline of a face. If we accept my thesis as correct that our high mountains are petrified creatures of prehistoric times and that they were killed by Jesus with the flood, then we have to assume that these life forms of prehistoric times consciously took this position. But when would such behavior make sense? It would make sense if these creatures of ancient times knew that they would be forgotten for a very long time after death by the coming flood. It makes sense if they knew that sometime in modern times, i.e., the time after the flood, humanity would only have a low scientific technical level for a long time and it would take millennia for mankind to regain the technical knowledge to put satellites into orbit again. It must then have been the hope of these creatures of prehistoric times that one would recognize this and other faces on the basis of the satellite images and also notice that the chin is the Himalayan high mountains. In the end, there must have been the hope that someone would also come up with the idea of thinking about how the mountains could have been formed and then discovered that the mountains actually only consist of many fossilized creatures of prehistoric times. I suspect that, at its core, this is the real point of myths about the Yeti, who, according to mythology, is said to be a snowman in the Himalayas. By searching for the Yeti, it was hoped in the end that the fossilized creatures of prehistoric times would be found in the Himalayan high mountains or in the other mountains on our Earth. In the USA, there is also such a Yeti. There, however, he is called Bigfoot. The high mountain physiognomies of faces or parts of bodies are not only so in the Himalayas. As a second example, we now go to Europe, where we see the high mountains of the Alps and the Carpathian Mountains. I'll give you a moment to see if you can see on your own which parts of the body the Carpathians and Alps in Europe represent here. To get a better idea of this, I zoomed in on the area in question. In a few moments, I'll show you the information for help again, in 3, 2, 1 now. You can now see that on the right the Carpathian Mountains are one arm and the Alps are the other arm of a giant. The head is located roughly where the Czech Republic is today. This giant has no legs. Where they should be is Greece with its many islands in the Mediterranean. From a space perspective, one could interpret that the upper body is that of a human and the lower body that of a fish. In other words, a fish person, a hybrid of a human and a fish. In the case of Yeti and Bigfoot, we have already suspected that mythologies could also be used to rescue real facts from prehistoric times into the time after the flood. If we look at this European giant, which seems to be a hybrid of a fish and a human, it is striking that in Roman and Greek mythology there are indeed hybrid beings of humans and fish. Roman mythology describes mermaids, which have also been filmed numerous times in Hollywood. Our streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime will also offer mermaid films. Greek mythology knows Triton, a god who has a human upper body and a lower body of a fish. In this tenor, one could assume that Jesus wants to give us a hint with the fence post not to completely reject the statements of the mythologies. What if in the time before the flood there were not only hybrid beings of angels or gods and humans, but also of humans and animals? For example, humans and fish? Isn't that an interesting train of thought? In this video, I said that the Eurasian continent can be interpreted as a dragon from a space perspective. Within the Great Eurasian continent, however, there are smaller representations of faces or giant beings. The examples of the face in China, where the Himalayan high mountains represent the chin, and the giant fishmen in Europe are very vivid and good examples of this. In spite of everything, one could say that it is difficult to recognize the Eurasian dragon, so that today's Spain is the head of the dragon, and Scandinavia and Turkey are the front legs. I can only confirm this criticism. You always have to be careful not to get caught up in any thought bubbles. Now let's look at the Eurasian continent from a different perspective and turn it around. On the far left we see Alaska. The northern far east of Russia seems to be able to be interpreted here as a dragon's head. The interesting thing is that Scandinavia and Turkey can again be interpreted as legs of this dragon, but this time not as front legs, but as hind legs. Since almost all viewers of my video are not familiar with such perspectives from geography, I briefly display the national borders on Google Earth and make a few hints as to where which country or region is located. Now I erase the boundaries again and suggest that you take your time to look at this Eurasian dragon and let it work its magic on you. As I said, this dragon is not fully visible. The head and hind legs are clearly visible. The tail is also clearly visible. This is now Spain and Portugal combined. So what was the head of the Eurasian dragon in the first perspective is now the tail in the twisted second perspective. Again, I think this can't possibly be a coincidence. Thus, the Eurasian continent can be interpreted as a dragon with sufficient certainty. If we consider that our present-day continents came into being only with or after the flood, we can now also better understand the statement of the Apostle John in Revelation when he describes that he saw a dragon coming out of the sea. Jesus would then simply have shown him the earth covered with water and how, after the water had drained away, today's surface forms and continents were formed on the earth. From a space perspective, some continents could also be interpreted as dragons. Thus, the concept of the dragon in the book of Revelation does not have to be a purely spiritual interpretation. It can also be understood in the literal sense from the topography of the earth after the flood. Next, we come to Africa. This view here is a bit unusual. That's why I'll quickly show you how to get this view on Google Earth. Quite simply, by taking our usual view and simply rotating the continent with Google Earth. Here I will briefly show you some well-known countries with guidelines. In this view, South Africa is at the top of the list. The African desert areas that we usually have in northern Africa are therefore now visible below. The mythologies also tell us about double-headed beings in the past. Here, in this view of the African continent, I think we can see such a double-headed being. Please try to find this one yourself by stopping this video. First of all, note double-headed creatures do not have to belong to the same species. For example, the well-known Sphinx of Giza could be interpreted as a quadruple hybrid, as a human woman, a lion, a snake, and a bird. The wings of the Sphinx of Giza are no longer visible today. These were dismantled in the period from the 18th or 19th century onwards, just as the current appearance of the Sphinx of Giza has little to do with its original appearance. I am of the opinion that archaeology in the 18th and 19th centuries found many well-preserved diverse hybrid beings. The results have just not been made available to the public. I have made these and other interesting statements in my thesis, Theology and History of Prehistory, which is linked in the general information about my channel. So not with the information about this specific video here, but with the general channel information. But let's get back to the twin head of Africa. I'll show you guides in a few seconds. Namely, in 3, 2, 1, now. At the top right we see a face that could also be of an animal. On the left you can see a bird's head relatively well. I spontaneously think of a parrot. Next, let's come back to a very specific Nephilim, which should be known to almost all people by its geographical name. It's about Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth. We are now back here on Google Earth and are now trying to maneuver our way to Mount Everest. Now that we have finally come to Mount Everest, we are now trying to find a face. To do this, let's start spinning completely in circles once. This is a good way to use Google Earth to search for faces or bodies of petrified large beings in our mountains and high mountains. I have now stopped because a face is clearly visible in this perspective. Please stop the video and try to recognize the face. To help you, I'll show you state borders. This will be the border between the People's Republic of China and Nepal. The face can be seen on the left side of the Nepalese border, not on the right in China. Another clue is that the giant is on its right side and we can only make out its head from above on the side. Can you recognize the Nephilim? In a few moments, I'll show you guides again. And in 3, 2, 1, now. I hope that you will be able to recognize the face of the Nephilim with additional information. When the Nephilim is on its right side, we can see that Mount Everest is its left shoulder. His head, which we see to the left of the state border between China and Nepal, is therefore significantly lower than the top of Mount Everest. The scale of Google Earth allows us to roughly estimate the diameter of the head, as we are not geologists or surveyors who can do this to the meter. I would estimate that the head is about 2 kilometers in diameter. For comparison, here I'm fading in my own head with a white ruler. This is a maximum of 20 centimeters in diameter from my chin to the crown of my head. Let us now use mathematics to calculate the size of the Nephilim as a whole. Because we don't see his entire body, because somewhere in the Himalayan mountains it has disappeared from our sight. It's been some time since I went to school. That's why I'm not sure I'm calculating correctly here. I'm going to make a mathematical equation by converting the centimeters to meters in the unit of measurement, and then I'm going to figure out how big the Nephilim will be. We can see from the result that the diameter of the head of 2,000 meters suggests a total size of 18,000 meters, i.e., 18 kilometers. So there is an approximately 18 kilometers tall giant lying around in the Himalayas and forms the largest mountain on our planet with its left shoulder, which is known to us with the name Mount Everest. The Nephilim, which forms Mount Everest with its left shoulder, was therefore about 18 kilometers in size. It may be a bit smaller if I misjudged the diameter of the head. It may also be that the head diameter is not 2 kilometers, but only 7 kilometers. So when I say that this giant is about 15 or 18 kilometers across, the question arises to what extent one can check whether Mount Everest is really a giant. Actually, I have already brought the answer to this question in this video, where we discussed the kite near New Zealand, which I will briefly show you again here. There I have already suggested that mountaineers and cave divers blow themselves in through the presumed mouth. You would then have to find a lot of caves and passages. These are all the innards of a biological living being such as the trachea, esophagus, stomach, intestines, etc., etc. It would be practical to have human and veterinary physicians in the team. They can then judge on the basis of the fossils of the organs whether an organ of a living being could actually have been here before the fossilization. How you can imagine this can be seen in a cave in Vietnam. This cave is called Snoong Cave. There is also a small article about this cave in the German Wikipedia, which I will briefly show you here. This cave is about 9 kilometers long and is, in my opinion, a fossilized giant of prehistoric times. A video about the cave was also published on YouTube, which I would like to link to you in the video description. I fully agree with the arguments of the authors of this video. In my opinion, there is actually a very good argument as to why a stone should have been his heart in the past during the giant's lifetime. I am now showing you this presumed heart and hope that the resolution is acceptable. According to the authors of this video, today's cardiologists will easily be able to recognize the structures of a human heart from this stone. I think that it is impossible that geological or weather-related events, such as wind, earthquakes, or whatever, can shape a stone that has the typical structures of a human heart. It is much more plausible to assume that it really is a petrified heart, especially since the Holy Spirit also indicates this in Job 40 verse 18 in such a way that the beings of ancient times, such as the Nephilim, were petrified. Tubes of bronze are his bones, and his bones are like rods of iron. Finally, I would like to present you with two challenging images. You already know the first one. It was my desktop picture at the time when I wrote my thesis on theology and history of prehistoric times. In total, this took 2 years, with several months of using this desktop image in the final phase. I don't know which mountain it shows. At the time, I was simply looking for a desktop wallpaper for the Himalayas on Bing. That's how I came to this photo. You can now stop the video and try to recognize faces here. The next clue is that you can draw a dividing line in the middle at the top of the mountain. Two large Nephilim sit next to each other, so to speak, back to back, and thus look in opposite directions, as you can see in the picture I am now showing you. These two great Nephilim don't have normal heads. I would rather describe the shape of her head as a pointed flat face or a flat pointed face. These two large Nephilim aren't the only ones on my former desktop image. Several smaller Nephilim have also joined these two large Nephilim with pointed faces. I assume that it was a family waiting for the outbreak of the flood. They have presumably moved to their last position before death. Similar to a patient of a hospice in Germany, who chooses the clothes before death, which will then be put on him by the hospice staff when he has died. In this clothing, the surviving relatives should then be able to see the deceased one last time and say goodbye to him. That's how I interpret this image. It is a sad picture, but also a picture of hope for these giant beings of ancient times, that someday, after thousands of years in the time after the flood, after almost everything from the past has been collectively forgotten, someone will recognize the dead and petrified Nephilim of the Bible in the mountains and high mountains of the earth. As a second and last picture, I will show you a picture from the Andes. A hybrid of a human and a tiger can be clearly seen here. However, there are other tigers or hybrid creatures of tigers and humans to be seen in the picture. I'm not giving any more hints now. I assume that it is a sophisticated picture and not everyone will recognize these tigers or tiger family. I issue a selective ban on reporting to the press. If it is known how and where this tiger family can be recognized in the picture, the press should not correct it. It should be shared on social media as much as possible whether you have found the tiger family or not. It should also be stated whether you have used technical aids by hiring an IT freak with image editing software to analyze this photo, or whether you have simply asked an autistic person to take a closer look at this picture. The solution should not be made public by the press, nor by private individuals on social media, simply so that it remains exciting and remains a challenge for the general public for a longer period of time. I am aware that my video may lead to a controversial debate, because the previous historiography of humanity is turned upside down with this video. Until now, we have assumed a linear historiography, which means that in the beginning everything was worse or more ignorant. As human development progresses, it learns, becomes smarter and, on average, everything gets better. I am of the opinion that humanity has gone through a non-linear development. In ancient times, there had been a high civilization of mankind, but also the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible and other hybrid beings created by the 443 gods. This creation was much more impressive than today's. Jesus made short work of this irregular creation in the flood, pronouncing a curse on oblivion on almost everything concerning the time before the flood. This is the real reason why we know next to nothing about the time before the flood, except that there were the Nephilim. Mercifully, we still have a genealogy in the Bible, but that's about it for information from the Holy Spirit in ancient times for us in the Bible. The Bible does not really report until the flood, i.e., in modern times. I think that this curse of oblivion was a measure of the deadly divine justice of the triune God of the Bible. What else I think this forgetting curse is all about and is good to know will be discussed on this channel in another video. That cannot be the purpose of this video on the formation of mountains or the formation of the surface forms of the earth. If you want, you can take a look at my channel to see if you can find the video. I hope you found the content of my video interesting in terms of subject matter. Unfortunately, the rest of the presentation of my video will not have been so good. This is due to the fact that I have never produced videos for social media in my life so far, and first I have to find my way into making not only thematically and content-wise sophisticated and good videos, but also that the rest of the world will also be good or very good. I would ask you to allow me some more time. At some point in the future, the videos will also get significantly better in the direction of professionalism. Until then, I invite you to accompany my development there and not to get upset about minor or major imperfections or mistakes in the production of my videos. It is much better to pay attention to the factual and content-related information that I actually want to convey in the video. No master has ever fallen from heaven if we don't take Jesus into account and leave it out. My request is that you take your time to think through my arguments in this video and not make any hasty negative judgments. Discuss my arguments with friends and acquaintances. On this channel, I want to guarantee that a video will be uploaded every 2 months. God willing, however, I want to do this every month in 2024. Every first of the month at 0 o'clock California time, a new video will be released. Until then, I wish you all the best.